everybody, Eric out in Sage Dynamics, and this is the B&T USW G17. Pistol PDWs are becoming a little bit more popular these days because there's more options out there than traditionally there used to be. You can find, even though the PDW term didn't exist, you can find pistols with stocks on them going back 100, 150, even further than that, years. So it's no surprise that occasionally they get reinvented for different purposes. B&T has been producing the USW model, which is not this particular one, but it is a family of pistols with stocks. Let's just go ahead and call it what it is, for quite some time now, and they continue to evolve and provide more options. The original one was based, I believe, on the Sphinx, if you will, and then they did a P320 version, and finally we have a chassis that goes around the Glock 17 handgun, be it the Gen 5, Gen 4, Gen 3. I put a Gen 5 17 in there with aftermarket work done by Agency Arms for the purpose of the review. Now, because this is just a chassis, there's not much to review really, but it's something that I was curious about, wanted to get and see if the durability would be there for a chassis accepting the Glock handgun. If you don't want to, if you're already Glock native and you don't want to purchase 320 magazines or go the Sphinx route, you can purchase this chassis and put whatever Glock 17, Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 5 you want inside of it. As far as features go, again, it's just a chassis. It's accepting a complete handgun. So for the purpose of the review, I'm not looking at the functionality of the gun itself, except if the chassis is going to cause malfunctions, because there are some relationships that have to work correctly with the way the chassis functions inside. There is a reciprocation that's still going to occur, and you have to replace the back plate on the slide to add this charging handle here in order to charge the gun. Now, the chassis does have relief cuts, so you can still use at least the traditional left side, be it right-handed magazine, or I'm sorry, slide release. However, I found during the 2,000 round review process that you might as well just work the charging handle, because getting up there and actually having enough room when this thing is, well, locked to the rear, let's go ahead and do that, is a little bit problematic, especially coming from a thumb position on the right hand here. You can get it, but without a aftermarket slide release, it's better just to go ahead and charge the handle as opposed to try to use that. Also, it is a folding stock, so you can deploy it from a pistol, and then it's got a quick release right there which deploys the stock and allows you to go into a stock shooting position. Installation of the Glock into the USW G17 chassis is pretty straightforward. You follow the directions. One thing that I did have to be aware of during the review process is making sure this tension screw here stayed tight, because after 400 or 500 rounds of shooting, I did have it loosen up on me a few times. The chassis accepts an optic, which is cool because now I have a non-reciprocating optic on my stock PDW, stock pistol, if you will. It is native for the Aimpoint Acro, however, it does come with a Picatinny attachment, so you can add a Picatinny optic. I went ahead and put a Holosun 515 on here because my Acro is otherwise occupied and I didn't want to take it off that gun to put it on here. And the 515's been good to me, so I figured I'd put it on a new home and see how it handled the review. Especially since I was going to be drop testing this, I wanted to choose an optic that I already know can handle those drops. Now, this is something that does have to be SPR'd because it comes with a stock. A lot of places you order it from will go ahead and do the engraving for you. You can insert your frame and your slide into it. There are aftermarket pistol braces available, however they are hard to find. So you could buy this and then change out the stock for a pistol brace if that's something that you wanted to do. Now, the question a lot of people ask is, well, what's the point? The review is not about the point. However, this does have a very niche use. The first thing I think of when I look at PDWs, the folding stocks like this, is off-body carry. Also, a home defense type gun. If you have small children, especially a child that you may have to pick up and carry, a handgun does make more sense than a full-size rifle. In the event or in the moment or in the situation where you didn't need to pick up, or you had already picked up a child and put the child down, you could then deploy your stock and have a more stable aiming platform, still using pistol caliber. As a suppressor host, the Glock is an excellent metric for suppressor testing because Glocks are, in my experience, notoriously finicky, or more finicky than other guns when it comes to being suppressed. Adding a chassis around that, I was curious to see if it would be even more interesting. As you know, almost everything firearm related, at least for the purpose of the video, I do a 2,000 round review process. I have made a change recently to where I don't do the burn down first. I do 500 rounds and then the second 500 rounds of the burn down. Almost everything firearms related, almost everything firearms related gets a drop test every 500 rounds, usually optics or accessories like that. Burn down is a staple. The drop test depends on what we're talking about. Because this is a chassis and I'm curious to see if I can dislodge the gun from the chassis, I was going to go ahead and do those drop tests every 500 rounds. For the first 500 rounds, I just got a really good feel for the USW, and I found that it provided a really good deal of accuracy. Something people have commented on before is they don't like the length of pull. They notice that the stock is very short and you have to lean into it a lot. And that's really okay. You're not going to interact with the reciprocation of the slide like you do with some of the other PWs out there. The reason that length of pull is so short is so the stock can still fold and not go past the muzzle of the gun. Even though that's not super important, I wouldn't want my stock sticking out too much further than the firearm, especially if it was going to interact negatively with any muzzle devices or suppressors that I put on it. So you are kind of limited in length if you want the stock to be able to fold flush to the frame of the chassis or the PDW. So that's one of the reasons these stocks do tend to be pretty short and pretty slim, so they're still kind of streamlined. There are holsters available for this, so you could carry it outside the waistband just like you would a traditional handgun, shoot it like a traditional handgun, and you're able to deploy that stock whenever you need it, just with your index finger, your trigger finger, if you will, and go ahead and shoulder into it like you would, well, a rifle. The grip is a little cumbersome, does take a little bit getting used to because you're using a rifle type support with the cheek weld and the shoulder weld, but your support hand isn't going to have to be run out on a rail or anything like that. You're pretty much using a traditional pistol grip type shooting grip, maybe slightly different if you're working, you know, a light source or something like that. Oh, this is a Picatinny rail. If you wanted to forego the light and instead mount a vertical grip or something like that, you definitely could. So after the first 500 rounds of getting familiar with it, I went ahead and did the burn down. If you don't know, the burn down is 500 rounds as quickly as possible to see if that accelerated rate of fire will cause problems or show problems that the same amount of ammo over a much longer period of time would not show. Because you get something running, you get something hot, sometimes you see things that you wouldn't normally see with the same amount of ammo over a much longer period of time. Here's your burn down. No malfunctions, no issues, although you will notice that the ejection pattern sometimes is a little anemic, and that is not the chassis' fault. This gun is tired. I didn't change out any of the internal parts before putting this 17 in here. This particular barrel and guide rod and frame, not slide but frame, are the same ones that I used for the Acro and some of my other optics reviews. So they have the frame itself has almost 25,000 rounds on it. Nothing's been changed out, so it went right into this for the purpose of the review process. However, when suppressed, it still maintained that anemic ejection pattern. I didn't have any malfunctions. However, that's something that I am curious about. I went ahead and changed out the guide rod after those 500 rounds, the recoil spring, if you will, and I noticed that when suppressed, it still had kind of an anemic ejection pattern when suppressed with different suppressors. Used a rugged obsidian as well as the Microtech suppressor. And it still had that consistent anemic ejection pattern. Taking the suppressor off, the ejection pattern got better. I don't know if that's chassis related, because Glocks, like I said at the beginning of this, can be finicky when it comes to being suppressed. However, no malfunctions are occurring, so it does bother me a little bit that my ejection isn't really getting those casings out of the way, but the gun's functioning, so at least we got that going for us. Of course, the big question is, can I dislodge the chassis? I'm infamous and famous for my drop testing, generally related to optics. However, I did want to include the drop testing in the review of the USW to see if I could, like I said a couple times already, dislodge or cause a shift in zero, because the optic is zeroed to the gun and the chassis, but if I remove the gun from the chassis and put it back in, it probably wouldn't maintain zero. So can a drop or a significant impact or something like that cause dislodging of the chassis, or I'm sorry, from the frame of the gun from the chassis of the USW. So I went ahead and did a drop test every 500 rounds, 4 drop tests for the purpose of this video, 2,000 round video. First up, let me go ahead and show you the 5-round group I shot for confirmation of zero before I got into the 2,000 rounds. And then Every 500 rounds, I did a shoulder height drop test in the drop zone. So here are your drop tests. And finally, the moment of truth, did it maintain 0? Here's another 5-round group fired after the final drop test. I'd call that 0 maintained, so that's good. Now, the final question might be, why the hell would you need one of these? Kind of already covered my thinking behind it. This is for some people, it's going to be something you get just because you want it. Does it serve a purpose? Yeah, it does. It gives you the ability to shoot a pistol with a stock on it. Do you need it? I don't know. That's kind of a personal question. I certainly wouldn't try to talk somebody out of buying one. There are other products on the market that serve the same purpose for a comparable or more reasonable price. However, quality may vary. There's a lot of cheap plastic crap out there that give you a lot of cool fangled options, but in my experience, those products don't hold up nearly as well. And I'm not going to do a comparison. I'm not even going to mention anything by name. I'm just saying that quality does vary when it comes to pistol chassis for shoulder supported or pistol brace supported, well, chassis, I guess what I'm going to keep calling that, because that's what it is. I would have liked to seen B&T just do a dedicated one like they did with the P320, the SIG P320, which is they just sell a frame that has a stock on it. And the main reason I think they went with that one is because the P320, the firearm part of the P320 is the fire control group, which is removable. So it's a little easier manufacturing wise and you know, almost legality wise. You should just go ahead and make a polymer stock that's not considered a firearm, and if somebody wants to drop their SIG P320 FCU into it, they can. With this, you got to drop a whole Glock into it, and if you're going to buy it and you're going to keep the stock on it, you've got to SBR a handgun, which isn't a big deal if you already know how to SBR things. But then of course engraving comes into it, and I just had the engraving managed to the chassis because this thing can't be readily removed once you install it. You can take your handgun back out of it. It's just not a, well, it's not a toolless operation, if you will. As far as use, the big example, the first thing that came to my mind when I started looking at it was that home defense type scenario. Small kids, you want to be able to run a handgun one-handed if you got to scoop up a child or hold a child's hand, but still be able to deploy and use this as a rifle if the moment or the situation or the opportunity presented itself. Also, for if you've got a hard box or a weapons vault inside your vehicle, a small one, a console vault like you see in some of the bigger trucks, could support something like this. A lot of your off-body carry bags from Vertex and some of the other companies out there can easily support this. I trained a lot with it, just working it, or I should say practiced a lot with it, working it from the bag, also working it from underneath concealment in a jacket just towards the tail end of winter is when I got this. The only issue there, if you were going to carry it underneath a jacket or something, I'm not judging, I'm just saying it's possible. You can get a single point sling and very easily conceal this under a long coat. Unless you're going to put like some kind of trigger guard cover support on it, you're going to have to carry an empty chamber. Unless you want to carry a hot gun that's just kind of dangling around, which I highly do not recommend. So if you were going to carry this thing concealed, almost shoulder holsterish, I would highly recommend carrying it on empty chamber and just practice to rack it, deploy it, shoot it from there. You don't want an exposed trigger just floating around underneath your clothing unless you're into that kind of thing, which I again do not recommend. Not a lot else to really say about it. One thing I would have liked them to at least given me the option to do is mount a section of Picatinny on this open real estate. This is free real estate, and I would like to have used it, especially since this thing kind of it's a right-handed thing. I can shoot it left-handed, but since I shoot rifles right-handed, it just made more sense to shoot this thing right-handed, which means I could have had this space available for another accessory. Like I could have moved the light up here and put a VFG here, or I could have put a laser here. I just wanted the option. I wanted to use this real estate for something other than, well, it's not doing anything whatsoever in its current state. So I might actually have that drilled out and threaded and see if I can't put a little section of Picatinny right there to make me a little more happy with the overall thing. But overall, I'm really happy with it. It's got a reasonable price because it's not actually a firearm, it's just the chassis. You can just go ahead and buy one, SBR it, or like I said, hunt down one of those elusive pistol braces. I imagine if these things become more popular, you'll start to see more people make braces for them. But this is just one more option in that pistol PDW category we're seeing more and more people make things for, and I will be checking out a few more of them in the future. I like this thing a lot. However, there were some improvements that I think could be made. One of them definitely would be that pick section. The deployment is good, the stock is good. A little stronger spring for the actual deployment. That's spring loaded right there, but I would like it to actually shoot the stock all the way out. Instead of just kind of like, anemic. I've tried playing with the tension here and it doesn't really make any difference. It still doesn't come quite out to shoulder position like I would like it to. But that's just a minor gripe. Other than that, this thing's pretty cool. If you have a use in your life for a pistol that has a stock and or a, well, brace on it, I highly recommend the B&T USW G17. I'm Aaron Calvin, Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.